What is going on, everyone? We are doing an after show because I guess Breaker and I wanted to get into I don't know, some philosophical discussions. Hammer it into it, hammer into it. So that's what we're doing. We were just discussing metaphysics. I want to point out that I am not a philosopher by training, so not my greatest strong suit, but I enjoy discussing philosophy. So yeah, Breaker, what were you saying?
Um, well, I was kind of liking it too. Like we were going over how you didn't like really debating philosophy because in your perception, like it's mostly like 90% semantics. But if you think about it, in the medical field, you have a separate specialized dictionary just for medical terms. Now, sometimes in that dictionary, you'll find it's like, hey, there's a word in this dictionary that kind of sort of looks like a word from the regular dictionary that's not a specialized medical term. And you would be right, because in the English language and the overarching clade of English, these things sometimes overlap. But when specifically talking in medical terms to another medical personnel about medical matters, you bring up like X multisyllabic word for medical dictionary, even though that might have another meaning outside of this specific field. It's implied from the onset that you two, being medical personnel using this word, know what this means. But if you then go to a bar and talk to a random person who's not a medical professional or person, they might use that word as okay, he's probably not meaning it in the medical sense, so I need to revert back to the normal dictionary sense. So even in that, you have splits of separate domains of dictionaries.
That's like or it's a little bit like Breaker. Are you familiar with the chemical compound oxidane?
That sounds like something that's a complex name for something very simple.
That is exactly where I'm going with that. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
you are familiar with oxidane because that is the IUPAC name for water.
Mm-hmm.
Some people they go with dihydrogen monoxide. That's too obvious. Oxidane. It's a in the same way that methane is a carbon fully saturated with hydrogens.
There you go.
Oxidane is an oxygen fully saturated with hydrogens. Hence, it's water. It's water. That's all. But
Yeah, well, that's like a different type of thing than what I'm. But that's related to what I'm talking about, because if you say oxidane to like a regular person, they're going to be like kind of doughy-eyed and mystified. It's like, oh, this is a clearly a medical professional or some type of biologist or scientist that is talking about something complicated and above my head. I'm going to quasi pretend like I'm sort of following along with this conversation, but not really. When in actuality, they're just talking about fucking water.
well, I think this is very much related because I think that um in certainly within like biology, uh people tend to use words that are big and fancy because it makes their papers seem more big brained and also makes it more difficult to actually consume the paper and understand it. And maybe that is also part of the goal because, I mean, you wouldn't want to just bear your ideas out there naked. You need to put them in fancy clothes and make them look nice. Uh, of course, I believe that's horseshit. One should just say your thoughts in as plain of English as you possibly can.
what
Uh,
what you're describing is malicious obfuscation, where you go out of your way to conceal what you're actually saying with fancy language, just to kind of win a type of proximal emotional argument to where the other person you're talking to won't know what you're saying. That gives like you a type of emotional implicit pull in the conversation that you're the superior and they're the inferior, and you have to teach them what these things mean even in the course of the argument. So that's kind of like a sneaky, clandestine, backdoor way of half winning the argument before it even proceeds.
and every single time that I've ever gone on Discord and I've talked to one of these goddamn philosophy majors, that's exactly what I encounter. They go, "Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't read Hegel's third work. I'm sorry, you didn't read Nietzsche's fourth book. You didn't read the entirety of Das Kapital by Marx or whatever the fuck." And it's like, okay, no, I didn't because that's not really my realm of expertise. But I can understand the ideas that are in these works, and we can discuss the ideas. And they go, "Oh, but you haven't read them. You wouldn't really understand them well enough." Fuck you. Go fuck yourself. You know what? If you can't explain the ideas in Hegel or Marx or Nietzsche or whoever the fuck, or Ayn Rand, it doesn't matter. If you can't explain the ideas in the book in simple English, then you're the retarded one. You're the one who doesn't actually understand what the fuck they were saying. That's my opinion.
Well, there's like a couple of secrets to that. It's like when you're reading, like usually right-wing philosophy, because I've been reading Julius Evola, and I read a bit of Ayn Rand as well. Usually what they do, if you notice, is they present everything in this type of either a mythopoetic sense or a fable sense, where they're giving like relatively practical examples that most people might be able to equate to something that's happened in their actual life. And in that way, when I hear right-wing philosophers describe their philosophies, it sounds very bottom-up and organic and emergent.
And
now, when I hear left-wingers explain their philosophies...
Let me guess, Breaker. The right-wing philosophers, they're not using a shit ton of jargon and frilly language. That would be my guess.
There are occasionally, but when it does happen, it usually has like this whole side chapter that gives this like parable as to why they condense that whole parable into like a single word. And even that makes more sense than what a lot of the lefty philosophers do.
Right.
Now, you could say, like an example of this would be something like Kafkaesque or something like a Sisyphean task. Now, if you know the parable of Sisyphus from ancient Greek mythology, you'll immediately know what that means, and it's very simple, and you might be able to equate it for something that you've lived in your own life, like this pointless endeavor of pushing this rock up this hill, until one day I was like, fuck this rock, I'm never going to do this, it's just a cycle of my own misery.
For anyone that doesn't know a Sisyphean task, it was Sisyphus. He was condemned by the gods to always have to push a boulder up a hill, and when he got to the very top, something would go wrong, and the boulder would fall back down, and he would have to try again and again and again. His only escape from this torment was to actually push the boulder up the hill, but he never could. So the point of a Sisyphusian task is that it is a thing that you keep beating your head against trying to do, but you will never actually succeed in. Simple.
Yeah, and you see how quickly you were able to explain that whole thing, and now we both know what that means, and everyone else knows what that means.
No frilly language needed to be used. I didn't need to cite Oxidane.
Yeah, it's a very practical example of something that people can relate to. There's like an interpersonal kind of connection with that type of thing. There's sort of this top-down, like, elitist, technocratic formulation of the lefty philosophy. Now, there's a very marked reason for this. That if you remember our good friend Parallax that we had on a few shows back, me and him were actually going over this. And it usually has to do with the difference between progressivism and conservatism on like the political spectrum.
Okay.
Progressives, by their very nature, have to manifest as this essentialist, technocratic, larger-than-life, like, beyond you mere plebs and mortals, like this type of artsy, fartsy, hoity-toity, holier-than-thou type of shit that manifests. Usually out of fear. If we're being, like, really dead simple about this, there's there's this insidious component of the entirety of the world around me. I am a mewling, crying, naked in the dark, eternally alone child cast into the freaking wilderness, and the only thing I could do to comfort myself and to bring rationality into this cold, unforgiving world that, from my perspective, utterly and totally rejects me and wishes me nothing but death and destruction, is to pull down sublime objects of ideology from some rarefied domain on high and make them fit into this cold, unforgiving, utterly destructive, deadly world that surrounds me. Whereas, like, the right kind of, like, they get into, like, a pattern of behavior, and there's, like, okay, there's these various paradigms that, through the conservation of this environmental paradigm I find myself within, I can sort of relax without constantly thinking everything's trying to kill me all the time. And I can kind of, like, appreciate nature and the natural world bottom-up process as not something that's always wishes nothing but my death and destruction, but is actually just a part of who I am on this fundamental level. And that's why the right look more emergent and organic, and the left look more technocratic and top-down.
See, I agree with that, as you could probably predict. I agree with that very strongly. You have to realize that yes, nature is a cruel mistress, and if like she's willing to just kill you and end your genetic lineage, but also you are a part of nature. Nature does not actually want to see you fail. It will fail you if you do a bad job. Actually, nature, I think it kind of wants to see you succeed, because it benefits nature itself. And when I say nature, I specifically mean, I have to use my terms correctly here. It's the multifaceted branching search algorithm that DNA uses to ensure that DNA itself always survives. That's the best definition that I have come up with for what nature effectively is. But yeah, that's nature, man. You know, you have to embrace what nature is. It exists. You have to live with it. You cannot reject it. You will not be able to make policies that will make you escape from it. It's not possible. That is the small ideas of man. The small ideas of man is that you can possibly escape nature. Doesn't seem to work like that. You have to live within your environment, and that's really the best that you can hope for. You live within your environment, you live a good life, and you pass on your lineage. Anything outside of that is the hubris of man.
Now, I know that there's a similarity between us where there were both times in our lives, I think a lot of people could say this, where we were considerably more left-wing than we are currently.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, think back to your old left-wing self and think of some of the things that you used to think and some of the arguments you used to find convincing from your earlier, more primitive, in this case, left-wing perspective. I have a feeling, before you even say anything, I'm going to make a prediction that most of the quote-unquote arguments you found compelling in those days were, one, highly rhetorical, two, highly charged with emotion, three, that emotion was directed at something that you related to as the man or some overarching authoritarian force that was trying to repress, suppress, or maybe even kill you. And or four, it was some, like, ultra high level hoity-toity word salady academic jargon that for whatever reason you thought yourself smarter for merely listening to. One, if not all of those things applied.
I think, what was that, 4 things? Yeah, I think all 4 things applied. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Like, all 4 fucking things applied, so now you see.
Yeah, I remember I was when I was growing up, I was a poor kid from a poor family, and so there was an emotional aspect of that. I was like, hey,
Evil
government.
Republicans want to kill you.
Yeah, and government should take care of me. That's the responsibility of the government. Why isn't it giving me fucking free money? I'm poor. There definitely was an aspect of that. There definitely was an aspect of I when I was a lefty, it was part of like the atheism movement. So I was like, ha ha ha, yes. Technically speaking, the Christians do not have any evidence for their god, ergo, I do not have to believe in it. Ha ha ha, I am mightier than thou. Yeah, all of that, all of that combined together, man. And it's only looking back now that I can be like, oh, that's bullshit. Like, I can see why that's bullshit. That was completely lacking in any sort of wisdom or knowledge about the world, and was entirely based off of like basically word-based arguments. But yeah, dude, I totally believed in that shit.
Which also makes perfect evolutionary sense, because when you're young and just starting out in the world, that particular type of everything is trying to kill me all the time, so I need to be like beyond hypervigilant, makes perfect sense and is ultimately advantageous to your survival. But if you notice, like, okay, have you ever noticed like animals? Animals, like, if you drive a car through like this backwoods area that's just like an off-road 4x4 truck, and you drive this thing through this verdant grass plain untouched by human hands, every single animal in there is going to scream and run and shout and fly and jump and move away as fast as possible from you.
Fuck is this shit? Yeah.
Yeah, but those same animals that, like, fucking deer next to a highway, those fucking deer will just, like, wander right into the road not really giving a shit because they perceive, like, these cars just zooming past and not an immediate threat to them. Now, there is a type of stupidity and naivety in that, too, because they don't realize what physics is, and that very heavy things moving very fast will, in fact, kill you. But they're not abstracting it that much. They're just like, okay, a natural part of this environment is these weird lit up zooming things on this strange hard ground that fly past. So I could just like hang out on the side of this freaking path relatively safely. And the deers, you'll see them just eating grass, and when you drive by in whatever vehicle you're in, they'll just stand there and look at you like, hey, it's one of those things. Oh, back to the grass. But if you drove that into the freaking woods, everything would be like, what the fuck?
So I think that you know how there's that thing about a deer, like a deer in the headlights kind of thing, where like when you're driving up towards a deer, it just stays still, and it's like it just stands there. I think that to some extent, like people make fun of the deer because it's like, well, that's a really bad move to make when a car is coming at you. Like, you should really move in the other direction. But actually, if you look at like what a deer does outside of the context of cars, it's like if something is approaching you really fast and it's very big and it has fucking lights on it for some goddamn reason, then perhaps the best strategy to take is to just stand there, because it seems like you can't outrun it. So the best thing that you can do is just stand there and fucking act maybe as confident as you can. In the same way that, like, I've seen a video of this. If there's a bull elephant charging at you, and you're a human, I mean, you're way smaller than a bull elephant, and it's gonna fucking murder you. But if you just stand there and you act like you're not afraid, and you go, rah, then the bull elephant might be like, okay, I don't know what the fuck this is. I don't want to deal with this. So maybe the deer is kind of doing a similar thing with the car. It's standing there and it's like, all right, like, this is a live or die situation. Like, I just have to stand here and just have to be as confident as possible, because like that's the only way that I make it out of this alive. Obviously, that's maladaptive to cars, because they're just gonna get run over. But in the wild, that actually is a behavior that might make sense, you know?
Tell you one thing, weirdly enough, that works on most animals: an umbrella. If you just suddenly open an umbrella, most animals, especially prey animals, will immediately be like, and run the fuck away really quick. You could probably guess as to why that is.
Yeah, because you just expanded your size by like 60%. Like, that's scary. Run the fuck away from that.
And what else in nature does a similar thing that every mammal, especially, is universally afraid of?
Birds?
Well, actually, reptiles. Specifically, snakes and frilled lizards.
I mean, most things expand their size when they're threatened, to be fair. Like, that's basically all things. Including humans.
Pylophiloric erection response or something like that. There's like some fancy name to it. Like the hair standing up on the back of your neck. There's a scientific term for that, but yeah. Yeah. But you see the thinking along those lines. This is like illustrating my point to like the left-right dichotomy in philosophical terms. It's like, because I'm thinking I have like this spiritual eidolon in my mind of the cobra fanning out its ribs and expanding itself, or the frilled lizard, or some primordial draconic creature of death incarnate that all animals are universally afraid of. Then you come along technocratically and say like, well, actually, scientifically speaking, like most things have a piloerector response to make themselves larger. Like, both of these points are technically right, but they're converging on something.
I'm not sure if it's the correct term, but the piloerective response, or whatever it is that make hair stand up, that actually would be specific to mammals, would it not?
Yes. Yeah, because mammals have hair, but you know what I mean.
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, like the
cat's hair raising on its tail and becoming really bushy.
Right, but here's the thing: the way that you, I think that the best strategy that a human can take, towards being a human, is not just to understand humans. You got to understand humans, of course, very complex shit. But you also have to understand nature. You have to understand both humans and nature. That's what you have to do if you want to be like a dope-ass human. And I'm not saying that I actually, necessarily always do that. I'm oftentimes confused. I'm just saying, in general, it seems like you want to understand humans and you want to understand nature. But you have
to... You know which humans understand nature best?
The Australian Aboriginals.
Weirdly enough, yeah, like humans like that just live in nature all the time and they don't abstract or geometrize or philosophize about these things. Listen to the Aboriginals talk about their mythology, and it's steeped in animism. Like everything around has like this animating force and a type of soul everywhere that's super permeable through all things. What they're describing is nature. They're just describing it in a very idiosyncratic, emergent, human way that is specific to that particular population of humans.
I think in general the Aboriginals probably have a very good understanding of nature. That is to their benefit. But here's the other thing, right? Human beings are very smart. We're oddly smart. How much wisdom can a cat acquire? It can acquire some wisdom, certainly. You'll notice that, or at least I've noticed this. I have two cats. One is a little bit older, one is a little bit younger. The older one is way more chill. I think it's learned from its environment that it can just relax with humans. It's learned that sort of wisdom, which is a very good wisdom to learn because the little fuckers are domesticated and they better goddamn work with humans if they expect to survive. Whereas with the younger cat, it's much feistier, right? Row is right. Yeah, exactly. So, like any animal is capable of acquiring wisdom. And I mean literally any animal. Like, in fact, I would argue that I bet an amoeba can acquire some wisdom, from its surroundings. Humans are kind of an interesting case in that we actually have the intelligence to support incredibly deep wisdom, right? But just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you're wise. You have to, number one, be intelligent, and then number two, you have to acquire wisdom. And I think that that's relatively rare for humans. I think it's rare that you see a genuinely, like, deeply wise human. But when it happens, that's incredible, because a human being is capable of probably greater wisdom than any other animal on the planet.
There's this kind of meme video of, I don't know the full context behind this. It looks like some type of prank. I don't think it's an actual scientific experiment because the scientific ethics behind this are kind of dubious, but it just looks like a prank, honestly, where they set this like little basket out in the middle of this orangutan habitat. And the orangutans are just wandering around. They don't really pay much attention to this basket. They probably think it's something like a weird looking rock or something, so they don't really pay much attention to it.
Do they put a key inside the basket?
No, it's actually far worse than that.
Okay.
What they did was, when they found a perfect time for that, all the orangutans were like sitting down and they were within eye shot of the basket. A motherfucker off to the side pulls a string attached to the basket, and out of the basket pops this like phony cobra that springs up, and it looks like quasi-convincing if you squint. But to the orangutans, they're like, "Oh shit, a cobra!" And literally every single orangutan, they're like spookily human-looking. Like the main orangutan in front, like lurches back and hugs the other orangutans and goes.
Well, I mean, I think most mammals have kind of like an inbuilt fear of danger noodles, right? It's a noodle, and it appears to be dangerous. You run away. I think every mammal has that instinct. Fucking danger noodles, you don't go near them.
Yeah, so there's like this really deep-seated wisdom in just being an evolved creature in the current state of nature itself that's already preeminent to any other abstract notions you might further develop. The weird thing about humans isn't that they have this supreme higher capacity for wisdom. It's that they can access so many ancient primordial highways of wisdom very quickly, but two, they can then draw not necessarily complete and accurate inferences from those pre-existing rivers of wisdom that super permeate their very nature. So you'll see humans have like dragon mythology is an ever-present thing throughout all humans. That they're literally just referring to snakes and fire and fangs and things that can fuck you up, but they've personified it and given it an actual corporeal form. That wisdom itself in humans has taken on the form of an idol that is abstracted and separate from the original origin of the wisdom.
So I can definitely agree with that, but I would say that I think that human beings are capable of greater total wisdom than, say, a cat. That doesn't mean that most humans will achieve it. In fact, I'm pretty sure that I've met cats that are more wise than certain humans that I've met. And, like, I mean,
because a cat doesn't have to consciously think about a snake. It just has to be like, okay, there's a snake. React to snake. Run away or bat at the snake and try to knock its head off and possibly eat it because I'm kind of hungry. Like some cats, like the lynx cats and the bobcats, you'll notice, sometimes they'll attack snakes, because their reflexes are so fucking quick. They can jump faster than the snake can strike. So they'll just stand there like a coiled spring ready to go. And when the snake strikes, they'll just jump 3 feet in the air and whack the snake in the head.
Oh yeah. That's the thing, right? Like the snake has very fast reflexes, but if you have faster reflexes than a snake does, then basically a snake is a very minimal threat because as fast as it can strike, you can dodge. So for certain organisms, among them is not humans. Humans have like actually shit poor reflexes. We kind of suck in that dimension. But for certain creatures, I mean, no big deal, dude. Like I can move fucking twice as fast as a snake. Like I don't give a shit. But it is the fact, and I want to really drive this point home. It is the fact that, although most humans, I think, are not that wise. I think most most of the cats that I've met are actually a little bit wiser than most of the humans that I've met. When it comes to the actual potential of humans, I believe that humans have the potential to be probably like the wisest species on Earth. I believe.
Well, that's why our podcast is called the Promethean Tides. If you remember the conversation we had about that, like the myth of Prometheus is that all of the other creatures of the earth, like all the other animals, were given like venom and fangs and speed and eyesight that would pierce the darkest night and all these fantastical attributes. But then humans are over here on the side. It's like, they're slow, their fingers are dull, their teeth aren't that fantastic, and they break kind of easily, and they can't see worth shit, they can't really smell, and they can't hear as good as a cat or a dog or something like that. It's like, what do these humans really do? It's like, well, what the allegorical semblance of Prometheus bringing the divine fire to humans, it's not merely literal fire, like the human's ability to light fires, although that's a major component of it. It's also symbolic of humans' unique ability, like you were talking about, to run along these ancient primordial highways. Like, okay, that'll kill me, that'll kill me, that'll kill me. But if I stay far enough away from that thing, it's not dangerous. But if I get too close to that thing, it is dangerous. And all these like subtle interactions that are completely organic and natural over time, over evolutionary time scales, will eventually lead to this thing that's like, because it is so aware in that particular way and can abstract, ruminate, ponder, and self-reflect and personify things in the environment, and even use parts of the brain. Like personification is using a part of your brain to recognize other humans and reappropriating that for a separate purpose. That is like a supra abstraction that humans are doing that, as far as we know, little to nothing else does. There's those scenes of like the lion taking care of the puppy, or the puppy taking care of a kitten as though it's one of its babies, but that's purely incidental. That's just like their instincts and oxytocin hormone responses operating in this specific way. Like, small furry thing good because oxytocin levels high. There's not really any abstract consideration of it beyond that. But humans are, in a certain dimension, abstracting that and pushing it up and transcending it through their thought processes.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And in fact, yeah, they're. I know that the title of Promethean Tides actually sounds a little bit random, but there was at least a modicum of thought that went into that, because that was kind of the direction that myself and Breaker kind of wanted to take this show. So yeah, there's definitely meaning behind that.
Well, if you remember Lord of the Rings,
wait, Breaker, hold on. And in fact, if you like the show, remember to like and subscribe. And if you want to have a particular idea put out there, also remember to comment. We have to do that.
Of course we do, because that's just a natural part of the show. It just reminds me of Lord of the Rings, like that quote, where it's like, History became legend, legend became myth, and things that should not have been forgotten were lost.
I think that the thing is that Warhammer 40k is cooler than Lord of the Rings. Just 100%.
I think naturally you would probably think that because keep in mind sci-fi is more utopian is the wrong word for it. It's something beyond that. Like because sci-fi can be both utopian and dystopian or either or combinations of the two in any proportions
Well, it's future
depending on the
facing.
sci-fi.
It's future facing is what it is.
And future facing is innately progressive. And progressivism is fear of the present and fear of your circumstances.
I mean, yeah, actually, I guess that you could interpret it that way. But I think that within mankind's nature is the ability to think about the future. In fact, we might be the only animal that can really do that, or at least do it nearly as well as we can. So I think.
Well, here's the thing. Other animals, this is like tapping into that ancient primordial river of wisdom that I was talking about before. Technically, like birds, for example. Birds, for all we know, don't abstractly, quote unquote, think about the future. But when the season changes and the temperature changes and the environment changes, they kind of have this instinctual drive. It's like, it's time to fly in this other direction for a very long time. Now, that's not necessarily something they planned out in an abstract, bullet-pointed,
They
listed
certainly
way.
did not, because it's a bullshit journey if you were to actually list it out and think about it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the migratory journeys are like, if you stop to think about them, it's like, why the fuck would anyone do this? That's why the weird, kooky,
Like the
anarchistic libertarian types are the ones that get on the boat and say, fuck it, I'm sailing into the fucking blue yonder.
the salmon, right? The salmon the salmon swim upstream for like 200 miles or some shit, jumping over waterfalls the entire time. Half of them get eaten by grizzly bears, and it's all so that they can fucking have sex and die, right? Which is great because they keep managing to reproduce, and that's what they ought to continue doing. Fuck yeah. But if a salmon actually had like a human mind and they fucking sat down and they were like, okay, hold on, you're telling me that I have to fucking swim like 200 miles upstream, I have a 50% chance of getting eaten by a grizzly bear, and even then, if I do manage to fuck, I just die immediately afterwards? You would go like, no, fuck that. You know what? I'm just gonna keep living in the ocean. Like humans would not accept that, but salmon do.
Yeah, I think that type of instinct is one of the primordial origins of what manifests in humans specifically as the progressive drive. But with like modern day progressives, you have this weird subversive element planted deep in the heart of it that I guess in Western terms, in the current juncture of history, it would be best to refer to it as Marxism, like Marxist tendencies. And if you remember the classic Yuri Bezmenov video, now that I've said that, YouTube might immediately be like, oh, Yuri Bezmenov, YouTube moderators just woke up like, oh, they mentioned him. We need to watch this whole video, make sure they're not doing anything naughty. But anyway.
I want to point out that Yuri Bezmenov was a fucking champ.
Yeah. Anyone can. I would probably recommend BitChute because YouTube, it's dubious as to whether or not you type that name in if you're going to get the video I'm thinking about. But General Chief, you already know the video, and I've given enough hints to the audience where they could potentially find it. But anyway, it's not necessarily because under natural circumstances, communism / Marxism in Russia specifically could have eventually reached a type of equilibrium and panned out over time. Now, it wouldn't be a utopian Marxist paradise where everyone eats for fucking free and is an artist and only works one day a fucking week. No, that's all just like idealistic claptrap bullshit. I think you and I both agree to that. But it could have eventually reached some type of compromise, but there was this intentionally subversive element because they found themselves at war with what they considered was a material manifestation of their ideological worst enemy and the sum of all of their fears. So what they constructed to combat that was the type of degenerative, degrading, poison memetic. Like, make them all sterile and fucking the wrong sex and turn them into blue-haired rainbow people and make them rebel against their parents and say fuck you to the wisdom and go their own way in the most detrimental and destructive way possible.
Let me ask you this then. It seems as though that entire thing, the reason why that exists is because man is able to at least try to predict the future. He's able to do enough pattern recognition simultaneously that he can kind of maybe see the results going forward. And so therefore mankind can plan for the future. Do you think that this was like maybe like kind of like a dangerous thing that nature implanted into us? Because as far as we can tell, there's not really another animal that has this capability. It seems to be uniquely human.
Well, whenever I hear the term uniquely human, all I hear is like,
fuck off, dude. It obviously is. It obviously is. Okay. Come on, it's self-evident. Don't fuck with me.
I'm going to explain that. Whenever I hear the term uniquely human brought up by people such as yourself and various other types of people, often the left also does this, by the way. They just do it in a slightly different flavor. Whenever I hear that, I hear like a type of myopic ecosystem, like a self-contained ecosystem. It's like, okay, of course, for a social animal, the mode of communication we're using right now only exists because we are social mammals.
Yeah.
This mode of communication wouldn't exist to this robust of a level with a fucking reptile. A reptile could just smell, detect heat, detect waves, and be like, I need to go in that direction to get a good thing, or I need to get away from that direction to avoid a bad thing.
I disagree slightly. Okay, not a reptile, but perhaps a dinosaur, right? So when you look at what are the smartest animals that currently exist, well, humans.
Oh, the Velociraptors did have hunting plans.
Humans are super duper smart. Like, we have won out for the time being. We've won out. We're the smartest. We're the biggest brain. We can invent the fucking internet. Go fuck yourself. 100%. Let's go humans. But there are other animals that seem to be approaching a similar level of intelligence, at least in the same ballpark. So within mammals, you have obviously our closest related shit, gorillas and chimps, whatever. That's actually not that interesting. But also you have something like a dolphin or a whale, also incredibly intelligent. What we can also see is that, for instance, the common dog, not really that smart in terms of like logical thinking like humans are, but incredibly smart when it comes to social dynamics. And so actually, like, dogs are almost as smart as humans when it comes to social dynamics. It's just the logic part that they miss out on. So actually, dogs uniquely smart in a particular way, but that's the mammals, right? But like also besides the mammals, you have like birds. I think that the
crows and the parrots.
The crows are, I think, I don't know. The crows and the parrots are both very smart. The crows maybe are a little bit smarter, and in fact, the smartest crow has tool usage thinking that is of that of like a 6 or a 7-year-old human, which is fucking nuts if you think about it. And then even if you go beyond the vertebrates, you still can look at the mollusca, and you can see the octopus. The octopus is an incredibly intelligent animal, and it is so fucking ancient compared to us that it develops mouth first, and we develop asshole first. That's the protostome versus the deuterostome. It's closer related to an ant than it is to you, and it's incredibly intelligent. So, like, we see all of these instances of intelligence throughout all of nature, and they're all very alien, but they all it feels like they also share kind of a commonality between all of them. Like they're all trying to do a similar thing. Like you can tell. Like the thing that it's trying to do is fucking use its intelligence to optimize the number of babies that it can have and deal with its environment. Like that's the central thing that unites all of these different intelligences that are all alien and weird or whatever, especially when it comes to the octopus. But I mean, that's what life does. It invented intelligence to make sure that you make babies better. It wasn't so that you could, I don't know, fucking decrease your carbon footprint, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, not only do I agree with you, I think the frickin'... Because if you remember, since we're talking about biology specifically, you might remember there was a distinct, like, branching off that happened with the Western capitalistic world's interpretation of biology and Darwinism, and the Eastern communistic world's interpretation of biology through Lamarckianism.
Ooh, that's actually, I want to point this out. Lamarckianism actually can be valid, but only in a very constrained environment. Overall, it's still being run by Darwinism. Lamarckianism, it exists, but it's only in very specific environments, and it's not the dominant force. I just wanted to point that out.
I agree with you, like in ultimate terms, I agree with you that Darwin number one, Lamarck number two, and so far as that goes. But the one really good thing that Lamarckian concept of biology can give you is Lamarckianism is really good with fucking memetics. Like, absurdly fucking good. But
you're right,
I know the human memetics are... Yeah, it is, but human memetics are based upon natural selection, Darwinistic selection pressures and processes. Like, we both agree with that. The gene number one, meme number two. But if you view the world through a distinctly Lamarckian lens, because remember, the technocratic, top-down, sublime object of ideology Hegelian Marxists, they're viewing everything top-down as like memetics number one. Memetics is preeminent to biology.
That's
so if
right,
you control the memetics,
that's the fucking insanity. Because that, like, when you say that to me, I'm like, no, that's impossible. What the fuck are you talking about? But I guess some people actually
from
believe
your
that.
perspective.
Yeah, well, fuck you. My perspective is right.
I literally just said I'm not disagreeing with you, like me personally, but
right. But like some people
here's
actually,
the thing.
Some people actually fucking believe that. They're like, no, actually, there is something that, like, the fact that human ideas could actually presuppose nature. How the fuck would that work? It makes no goddamn sense.
Okay, here's the thing. Here's what memetics can do. Now, you look down at an ant. You were just talking about ants. You look down at an ant and you see an ant following a relatively straight path. Now, your knowledge of like ant biology is probably going to clue you in onto what's happening here. So what you do is you reach down with your finger, and in the general direction that the ant is going, you smear your finger across the ant's predicted path. That okay, that ant's going relatively in that direction. What if I rub my finger across the ground?
It will change direction.
Right where you rubbed your finger, that ant will stop dead in its tracks and kind of like, what the fuck? Because you know it's following like a pheromone trail.
Right.
That's what memetics can impose top-down upon a naturally occurring biological system. Just with your finger movement rubbed across the pant of an ant, you can change that being's entire perspective of reality just with your finger.
Okay, yeah. I see what you're saying. That's a very interesting idea. I like that one.
And now you see it's like if you implant this poisonous, self-destructive ideology into what you view as your ideological enemy in the form of this capitalistic bourgeois country, just with your finger of memetics and your secret Marxian agents infiltrating the schools over decades, you can change an entire country's perception of its own reality.
Right, yeah. And in that case, it would be the instance that actually the Cold War never ended, and we are still in the midst of it. We were like, oh yeah, the Cold War ended in the 1990s. No, it's actually still going on. We're still at war, except now it's not just Russia, it's China, and they have memetic warfare. We have entered the what is it, the fourth and fifth generations of warfare, where it's no longer about tanks and planes. It's about getting the enemy populace to surrender before the war even starts. Like, yeah, 100%. I could see that could definitely be a thing that we are currently involved in. Yeah, definitely.
And now you see how you're going to want to viscerally disagree with what I'm about to say. But given everything we've discussed thus far, you'll know that there's a pernicious element of truth in what I'm about to say that you will not want to immediately accept, but the more you think about it, the more it starts to become a horrifying dystopian reality that in this particular way, memetics does impose backwards upon the underlying biology and fundamentally alters its course for the worse or the better. In this particular case that we find ourselves in now, it's mostly for the fucking worse, if we're being honest.
Well, actually, of course, I would agree with that.
Yeah, just like you can block the path of the ant, and just the whole concatenation of events you cause by doing that are staggering.
Let me say this, right? When it comes to a meme, fundamentally, I want you to ask yourself this question. Fundamentally, what is the difference between a meme and a rock when it comes to the evolution of DNA?
I know what you're getting at is where, like, I agree with you that the meme is ultimately, in an ultimate sense, contingent upon genes. Like, we've already agreed that Darwinism
They are
part
of the environment, effectively. The meme is an expression of not just, like, it's not just a meme that exists within the phenotype. It's not just a virus. It's also contingent upon the environment. So, for instance, the meme of building a house out of ice would not work in Africa, but it does work for the Eskimos. So, the meme is dependent on both the environment and the gene. Well, okay, but the meme is dependent on the environment. That means that from the perspective of DNA, there is a difference, but there is not that much of a difference between a meme and a rock. So yes, a rock can influence the way that DNA evolves. A meme can influence the way that DNA evolves. But ultimately speaking, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, it's not a meaningful statement.
Yeah, we both agree in ultimate terms it boils down to the genes at the end of the day. And, those genes can take the future of humanity, whatever it might be, in like many radical and strange and unforeseen directions that if we were to try to predict what the real future of humanity is like 100,000 years from now, we're probably both going to be wrong, but we'll never live to see it, so it's kind of like a pointless endeavor. But
well, I mean,
it's not a pointless endeavor.
We probably won't live to see it, but maybe, just maybe, this is what we do. We go through with the the singularity. We create the AI god, and this would be a revolutionary phenotype without a replicator tango, and we take this and we go, you know what? Can you solve aging for us? And then it solves aging for us, and then you and I, dude, we get to live forever. Boom, simple, easy as done.
Well, that's like a particular utopian view on things. Now, there's a way in which there's a way in which that's not entirely unthinkable. If you figure out von Neumann machines, their simpler term being nanomachines. If you can figure out how to make nanomachines work, I can tell you what you can do, and it would be very bizarre when this happens, if this ever happens. What would happen if humans figured out nanomachines and actually made them work is that you could inject yourself with nanomachines, and over the course of a arbitrary amount of time, whether it's 1 year, 10 years, whatever, in the course of that, like as your cells of your body are gradually replaced with the nanomachines,
you got a goddamn Theseus' ship problem.
Yeah, the persistence of identity remains. So if I, Brakir, or you, General Chief, were injected with the nanomachines, and within 10 years we just turn into like chrome robot-looking motherfuckers, but we still have the exact same memories and mind, but now in this weirdly, profoundly upgraded body, we would technically be immortal in that sense, but also at the same time no longer human or even biological in nature.
Yeah, and a simple solution to that is, is something going to make me non-DNA in nature? Oh, in that case, fuck that. It deserves to be murdered.
But here's the thing, like, in this augmented state, you could still technically reproduce, you just wouldn't be reproducing DNA. But the DNA-based drive for your reproduction to propagate genetically would be utterly replaced with a synthetic substrate rather than a biological substrate, but you would be doing the exact same things and capable of all the exact same things.
Yeah, so that's...
You are still Theseus' ship.
Right, and what that is what you're saying is that, okay, that is the devil coming to man and saying, I have a contract here.
The Faustian bargain, Mephistopheles.
The devil comes to man and he says, hey, I have a contract here. Would you like to sign this contract? What you're saying is, okay, yeah, 100%. Give up the fact that you are a DNA-based organism and actually engage in the phenotypic revolution itself. What you're saying is, hey, here's a bargain for you. If you engage in the phenotypic revolution, your phenotype will become part of the new genotype. Isn't that a really great option? That is the contract from the devil. I say, fuck that shit 100%. And I'm not a Christian, right? I think that I can sense terrible things when I hear them. And that sounds like a terrible thing.
I think you recently watched Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, didn't you?
Yeah, dude, 100%.
Do you remember that scene where it says that they come up to that sculpture that's like a foot on the ground and it says, "From Machine Man"?
Yeah. And then actually the sculpture changed each time they went into the mansion.
Yeah, but you're kind of getting ahead of it though. Like when they encounter the doll, like the man that has relegated his life to just being like this dead, inert doll object just sitting there passively.
I mean, right, although it was all a ruse, but yeah, he's kind of like a weird guy.
It was, but the only you remember the only way they figured out it was a ruse was by the Major's intervention.
Yeah. The Major helped them out.
And remember what Bato said when he turned to the other investigator. I forget his fucking name, but anyway, one scene where he turns
the guy
like
with
he
the
says
revolver,
that,
right? The investigator, the guy with the revolver.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Yeah, dude.
Like Otto is there, and he's like says like mankind is forever geometrizing, and his head like tick 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 tick, and it looks right. And his face just explodes into like the robot.
I actually, yes, I do remember that scene. Yeah.
Like that's the reiterative loop. That's where like that they've entered into such a realm of being that the synthetic and the organic are utterly indistinguishable. They don't even realize they're in this reiterative loop. Without the Major's intervention, they could have literally been there forever, just constantly geometrizing in this fractal, ever-descending Mandelbrot set,
But
like deeper and deeper and deeper.
But we know that we are not in that loop. We can actually know that for certain.
Are you not really? Like, when you reproduce and create, like, a new human, what is that?
Okay, so... I think that we know that we are in the original loop because, Darwinism is working as it should.
But is that even your own idea?
Fuck off. So, no. The thing is that if we were like one of these like I don't know, like all the way down fucking fractal things, then I don't think that Darwinism would actually work, right? Because you would just have just an infinite number of possibilities just occurring all of the time, just infinite fractalization. There wouldn't be selection for anything because like all events would just happen in an equal amount, and it's all just complete chaos. But it's weird because that's not the universe that we, personally speaking, find ourselves in. We find ourselves in a universe that is actually controlled by natural selection. Now, that doesn't appear to be random. That doesn't appear to be just the outcome of a series of many quantum interactions where all are more likely, or all are as equally likely as all other instances. Like, that's the thing, man. Like, some of these quantum, like, some of these, like fucking people that talk about physics, they're like, yeah, there's an equal probability that, like, the universe could have just existed without gravity or something, right? And it's like, okay, well, if there are an infinite number of universes that can all equally likely exist, then why is it that we happen to be in one that appears to be specifically tailored towards Darwinian design, right? It's like random chance kind of goes against Darwinism because Darwinism establishes that there is a selection method. So that seems to be in conflict with just random shit happening all the time under, I guess, like quantum theory or whatever. Did that make sense? I don't know. I tried to make that make sense.
Well, think about it like this. I see what you're saying, but think about it like this. I mean, consider that you're a man living in America. Now, this gets a lot deeper as we
dare
go along.
fucking assume my gender, you piece of shit.
I'm sorry. I didn't ask for your pronouns first, and I apologize.
Thank you. Okay, apology accepted. Go ahead.
By the way, what are your proper pronouns?
It's what is it? It's a yif, and yip, or some shit like that.
Okay, so you're a yif, and you've lived your entire life as a yif. By the way, I'm going to take that as though nothing unusual happened, and this conversation is just going to continue with that pronoun. I hope you enjoy your life from now on. But anyway, so you're a yif, and you've lived your whole life as a yif. Well, not wanting to assume your forebearers' pronouns, like there was a they before you that lived in a very similar way, that learned to speak English, the language that we're communicating with right now in a very similar way than what you yourself have. And the one before them learned it in a very similar way, and the one before them learned it in a very similar way. And not merely just the language, also like general life experiences. There might have been a different epoch of history, like your great great grand person might have been living during Depressionary era America and superficially been in a different environment. But I guarantee you they went through their rebellious teenager phase, they went through their like 20-year-old idealistic phase, and they went to their post 25 contemplative phase up to 30, like you yourself are doing now. And there are many, many, many similar patterns throughout the entire genetic lineage, all the way back to what could be considered the like mitochondrial Adam and Eve in the far ancient past of humans. And very similar patterns have occurred with varying levels of mutation. Like from simple rule sets emerge like greater and greater complexity with the emergent theory. The one thing that didn't change was the fundamental rule set from the onset. So going all the way back to the first thing that could be considered human, that's the fundamental rule set. Surprising similarity in pattern and emergence with each concurrent generation after generation after generation after generation. And this is why in the elitist theory, history is this type of mythos, and it's not really quote-unquote empirically instantiated.
No, but the tradition itself actually carries probably great wisdom with it.
Yeah, that's the fundamental primordial wisdom that it goes back even further than mammals. It goes back all the fucking way. It goes back to where you were just like a fucking... There's this great line in Dune 4, the God Emperor of Dune, where it's just like, look at me now. There was a time when I was just a tiny little thing, no bigger than a cherry, and now look at me. And what he's saying with that allegorically, like, topically you could say it's like he's referring to his birth in the womb, because the God Emperor of Dune can remember his own birth and life. But symbolically what he's saying is like, I can remember all the way back to the fucking primordial ooze. And I've contemplated the strange highways and epochs of history all the way back to the origin of biological life itself. And I've seen the patterns and the patterns and the patterns and the emerging and the emerging and the emerging over and over and over and over. And from my perspective, it all is just this self-similar blur of just father, mother, father, mother, father, mother, father, mother, billions of years.
See, I think there's actually a very deep insight in that. I rather like that.
You should definitely read Dune. Like, Dune is extremely Darwinistic. It is like hardcore, painfully Darwinistic.
Hey, you know what's weird, man? Like, how many biologists have you met on Discord?
3.
Yeah, I think I've met about 3 or 4 myself. How many of those biologists that you have met actually embrace Darwinism?
2.
Yeah, I got myself personally, because every other biologist I've talked to is I don't know, they're not doing their shit. But yeah, like, what's with that? Why is it that sometimes, like, actually maybe more often than not, biologists they don't really embrace fucking Darwinism? What the fuck is up with that?
That's the horror of being naked in the dark, the lone child crying for its mother in a howling void of total and utter indifference. That is like the refusal to accept the underlying eternal pattern of the manifestation of mankind. That is the fundamental refusal to accept life itself is suffering made manifest. And only you, through your action, have any hope whatsoever of changing that, and you are guaranteed to die in that pursuit and never actualize it fully yourself. The only actualization of that can be the future through your lineage, period. And that's the thing that the technocratic top-down leftist ultimately refuses to accept. Even Richard Dawkins himself, it's like, I don't want to live in a world governed purely by natural selection. Well, tough shit, Richard Dawkins. You wrote the fucking book on it. Fuck you.
You know what you were just saying there, it almost brought a tear to my eye, and yeah, dude, 100%. It's not a nice story, right? Like, but we never expected it to be. When mankind decided that it was going to try to understand the universe, did we ever really think that it was going to be a pleasant story that we could fucking tell to our children to, make them dream better? No, I think that we knew what we were exploring. We're going into things that, honestly, maybe man would be better off not knowing. But that's what we did, and at the end of the day, yeah. Evolution exists, and it's not pleasant, but it is the reality of the situation, like it or not. Right?
Pretty much. Like, and it's that fundamental unkind reality. It's like, okay, a fact of reality is like any creature, not just social mammals, not just whether you're like hyper K or hyper R selected on a biological level.
Let's go
regardless.
K. Let's go fucking K. Let's go boys. K boys. Let's go.
Yeah. Like whichever of those paradigms you more generally fit into the general groove of, there will come this moment in your existence, unless you're like a pure like collectivist organism like spores or something, where your mere existence is to form like a puzzle piece building block at the base of a mushroom, and you exist only to form the base of the mushroom. You're not going to be the spore that shoots out and reproduce. You exist. Like, mushrooms are nature's communists. Mushrooms are a living embodiment of the idealistic communism. Like, there are people who exist merely as truncheons, as building blocks to this idealistic pillar that reaches into the heavens.
You could say the same thing for
are
ants.
living versions of that.
You could say the same thing for ants. You could also say the same thing for any
social insects.
Any multicellular organism, because actually multicellularity is an example of eusociality. No, that's basically all complex things, not just fungus. That's all things. They all engage in that sort of thing.
Well, the difference between technically your heart cells, like in a vacuum, as just heart cells in a human body,
would not survive.
Are a type of, they're a type of eusocial creature. They're asexually replicating, but they can only do that in an extremely specific environment that is your heart.
Yes.
And they exist only to asexually replicate as your heart cells and rebuild your heart every 7-ish years to where it's like all new fucking cells. And that's their whole like life cycle. And when you die, their entire lineage, as far as they know it, is utterly terminated. Unless you reproduced.
Heart cells replace themselves incredibly slowly. They do it, but it's very slow.
From what I remember in biology, like every 7-ish years, all the cells in your body are replaced.
Well, yeah, that's not true. So, for instance, how often are your skin cells replaced? What is it, like every 35 days or something?
Those are very quick, but I'm talking
how
like
often,
globally, like the whole human organism, like 7 years for all those cells to do it.
But also, how often are the neurons in your brain replaced?
I would say much less often, if at all.
Yeah, they're not. They're not replaced. So basically, yeah, you can take an average and you can say, like, on average, like, cells replace themselves every 7 years. But no, your brain doesn't replace yourself, and your skin cells replace themselves every 35 days or some shit. And your blood cells, like the red blood cells that don't even have a fucking nucleus, Jesus Christ, they replace themselves even faster. Like, they live like a week or two. So, like, the average statement, like, oh yeah, you replace yourself on average every 7 years, is not really that useful. Because it's like, are you replacing your brain? No. Are you replacing like the calcium deposits in your bones? Not really.
Well, yeah, I guess you could like use this to expand the allegory. I was kind of like condense it down to fungus, but I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're getting really technical with it now. And that's with like allegorical and symbolic metaphors, like becoming, there's this threshold of becoming too technical where if you start to question something like a proverb too technically, you kind of like critically
Hey, Breaker.
erase
How many
the
how many
meaning.
how many how many fucking proverbs do I cite to you usually?
I would say there's about very little. It's probably two or three that you consistently utilize, but most of the other part of it is technical.
Right. I don't think that actually there. I don't know how much wisdom there is in proverbs, right? Like, in my opinion, I'm kind of like, fuck that shit, whatever. Like, if you can't live up to, let's say like basic reasoning, then go fuck yourself, right? There are kind of like how we were talking earlier, how it's like there's 99 ways to poorly abstract a system into your thoughts, and there's maybe like 1 out of 100 ways to do it well. Like, most of human conception, I don't think is actually a good match to nature. And so in general, a lot of these proverbs, they just not inherently trustworthy, I believe.
Well, there's a thing about that where the foundations of your technical knowledge and expertise rest upon the shoulders of so many giants that it's fucking staggering, and you can very glibly take many things for granted just with a few turns of phrase. Now, both of us being relatively well versed, I would argue you more than me, in like the mechanical and technical aspects of biological evolution, we could just say things very shortly and matter of factly and take for granted that we both know what we're indicating. But through the vast majority of human history, such things were not the case. Like when there were no giants on the shoulders for which you to rest, when we were just naked in the fucking dark as primordial hunter-gatherer creatures without even a written history, just mostly oral except for fucking cave paintings that were like, the cave paintings are like generalized symbols. They're not even like a technical language. They're just like, this group of people met this massive beast, and the beast was slain, and the people ate, and there was much rejoicing. It's like this very hyper simple thing that's indicating at a very deep primordial truth in a very casual temporal way. It's going to fade with time. It's not really meant to endure like for thousands of years, like some tome or some abstract data center that's going to contain all this knowledge for who knows how long, like the internet. It was just humans making manifest into the world some tiny portion of that deep river of wisdom. Now, as that is accrued over time through concurrent generations and become more complex and abstract over time with language, written history, more and more abstract forms of writing, till it gets like pure fucking code and Boolean logic where everything is hyper discretized in this like complete set of axiomatic self-referential crossways truths. Like before that, there was just the primordial wisdom of I am something who lives and something who lived.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. And I wanna point this out. I think that when it comes to um mankind's ability to gain wisdom, right? I think a lot of this is like, you think you do it through abstraction, right? But I think that actually, you can gain wisdom through just pure life experience, 100%. But I think that also the interesting thing about humans is that I think that we can actually gain wisdom from nature itself. Because I think that whereas most species are just kind of like lost in the ether, they're just like struggling to survive or whatever, human beings can actually understand the realm around them. And so a human being can actually take the time to look and go, oh, wow, there's this weird entity next to me. It's called nature. Maybe I can study him, and maybe that will increase my wisdom. And I think that is actually the case for humans. I think that more people should be studying nature itself. Not the human interpretation of nature, but fucking nature as it exists.
You realize, like, speaking purely emergently, there is a type of non-quantifiable vanishing point to where nature as is and the quote-unquote human abstraction of the nature distinction fades away, and there is only manifestation of nature through the primordial wisdom.
I think that nature always wins, no matter what the game. So I think I can agree with that much. Yeah, I mean, like, you can never defeat nature. It will always beat you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we both agree on that, but what I'm saying is that what is the point where you could say with confidence in the evolutionary history of mankind that the abstraction and mental processes and neurochemical processes of the human brains, as you walk it back through evolutionary epochs, you realize what I'm saying. You realize that there was no Latin-speaking mother that suddenly gave birth to a Spanish-speaking child and they couldn't understand each other. Like, you could understand that. That was an emergent evolution of language process through concurrent generations where the language and the meme slowly mutated over time with the genetic manifestations of the physical human beings themselves and the brains and the neurochemical process themselves over time slowly mutating this. But the genetic process was always underlying that as the fundamental foundation. There is a point in evolutionary history where that distinction that you are talking about must necessarily coalesce into pure nature manifest.
Um. Yeah. Yeah.
Unless your thoughts are divinely inspired.
No, I think that overall, one cannot escape nature. Yeah. Yeah. I think that that has to be true. You cannot escape it. It follows. So
Okay.
in
Now
that
consider that.
in that case, then is it possible for human beings to actually create something that could evolve beyond nature? And to that, I would have to say, yeah, of course.
Well, yeah, just like the base chemical process of these chemicals interact and these chemicals don't. End of story. Just to that like simple fundamental rule set, you might even say metaphysical rule set. Like through a weird coalescence of environmental factors and the properties of the chemicals themselves over sufficient time. These certain chemicals really like being in this specific configuration for whatever reason. And then they really, really like being in this configuration. And then they like being in this configuration so much that they impose the configuration. And as imposing the configuration, they just get to the point where it's just like, I really like imposing this configuration. I want to impose this configuration more efficiently. And then you get the first, like, revolutionary phenotype in the original sense, where the RNA gave birth to the DNA, and the DNA was like, you know what? I really, really, really like imposing my specific configuration, not so much yours. And then RNA is like, but wait a minute.
Well, you know what? I think that's a decent place to leave it. I think that was a fairly good discussion. So, with that, I think that that'll be the end of the after show. So peace out, everyone. Have a good rest of the evening, and Breaker.
Live long and prosper.
There we go.